It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, hello there, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. So delighted that you came. I appreciate it very much. Coming up in this show a little later, I have a little segment on a trip we took to the Southwest United States, mostly one night in Vegas and then the rest of it pretty much in Utah, exploring the mountains and canyons and all the fantastic, amazing rock formations out there. Absolutely gorgeous. And I go over that in a segment, so I'll just save that for there. Also, a very nice interview with my new friend Tom Jump, who asked me to be on his channel. He has a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel here, I see it's T Jump. Yeah, TJUMP. Easy to find. And he talks to a lot of religious people and asks them for evidence for their deity, their God. And of course, according to me, secondo me, the people that he has on don't even know what they're talking about, but they're trying so desperately to come up with some rationalization, an argument for what they already believe. But there's never evidence. There's not going to be evidence, I think. But whatever. He's given it a good old college try, and the people could come on. And he also covers a lot of other subjects, so you can look through his videos. But again, I don't want to spoil that because that's coming up. Other fun stuff. In a couple days, we're going to drive from Chicago to Orlando to hang out and visit some relatives for a few days. So haven't had a really long road trip in a while. No, I will not be taking my EV. We will be taking the RAV4 Prime, because it is gas and electric, because it's really easy to stop and put in a tank of gas. And no, this is not contrary to what I've talked about before. You could do it in the EV, but my EV is 2019, so it doesn't charge particularly fast. And I could do it. It would add a couple of hours to the trip, and I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to think about it, but it could be done. But we looked at flights, and the problem with the flights is the prices have gone up a lot. And the other big problem with flights is there's a lot of delayed and canceled flights, and maybe even more than average in Florida. But maybe that's because a lot of flights go in and out of Florida. And maybe it's because we're now looking for it because we're going to Florida. After that, I think the next really big trips are going to be to Vegas again, and I think it's San Antonio. I think it's Vegas for CSICon, Center for Inquiry, CSICon. You know what I'm talking about. It's the next best closest thing to replace the TAM conventions that used to happen in Vegas. So that I'm pretty sure that's in October. And then my wife and I will be there, and we'll hang out in Vegas for a couple days, and then go over to San Antonio, which is the annual conference location for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. So if you have been a good virus avoider for the last 2+ years, and you think you're going to be ready to go out in October, go to one of those conventions. There's others. I think it's late July. I'd have to check on this. Maybe I can get someone to talk about it. NanoCon in Nashville. I am waffling on whether I'm going to go or not, just because I've made myself way too busy. With Polaris, by the way, I have my company who helps me with regulations has submitted for Polaris to become federally SEC registered instead of state by state. So that's taken a lot of thought and effort. And sometimes running a business is like work. And that, I don't like that part. I like talking to clients, prospective clients, people that have questions. I like being the educator, the teacher that helps people learn more about investing. Which reminds me, I wanted to talk about this and I'd forgotten until I just remembered now. In a few episodes, I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to start it, I am going to readdress all the parts of the Polaris plan. Last time I did this in a rigorous manner was about 2 years ago, and people ask for it all the time, and I just refer them back to those episodes. I don't know how different it's going to be this time around. I mean, some of my allocations have changed or been modified over time, but I want to go over the general idea so that when you hear, last time I think it was 6 parts. It may be 6 parts this time. I'm not sure. I haven't really got it all mapped out yet exactly where the breaks are. But you could listen to these segments, one at a time as they come out. You could listen to them a year later and maybe 5 years later and find them useful as a roadmap, as a guide to how to possibly achieve reasonable returns with reasonable risks and how to get to critical mass, I guess, the everlasting nest egg, that as long as you take out a small enough proportion part, then you can do that in perpetuity, at least as long as you live. And then if you have kids, nieces and nephews, a charity, whatever, you could then leave the money to them. So that's kind of the nutshell. Because for me, the idea that my money can make money, and I don't have to do physical labor or work to make that money, that's pretty fucking cool. And just the super secret hint, probably the most important thing, and I'll have to put this in the part 1, the most important thing you can do is save a lot of money if you can. May not be easy for everybody, and some people right now probably can't at all, but you get the idea. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to do our segment where I'm going to talk about my Southwest vacation, and then we're going to talk to Tom Jump about his YouTube channel and all the cool stuff that he's got over there. So don't go anywhere.
How you can justify wanting to take something away from people from 95 that gives meaning to 95% of the American people and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people?
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so. As Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. Are not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
It's time for something a little different. I'm going to give you a vacation story. About a week ago, we just got back from a trip in Southwest United States. First, we stopped in Vegas just for one night, and we saw Cirque du Soleil's Beatles Love, or The Beatles Love. Absolutely delightful show. It's my second time seeing it, and I don't know, it just makes me really, really happy. Great music, great performance, the lighting, the sound, the performers, everything is absolutely amazing. It is easily my favorite Cirque du Soleil show. The O at Bellagio is quite good. But the Beatles one, I don't know. I think I like the Beatles. The older I get, the more I like the Beatles. That's what I'm trying to say. And then we went to Arches National Park and saw Arches and did an off-road ride in a big vehicle that climbs rocks and stuff. That was very cool. We had some days where the temperature peaked at 108. That's pretty dang hot. I know it's a dry heat, but it's pretty bad. But it's funny because even around 100, if you're in the shade and a breeze picks up, it doesn't feel that awful if you're outside. I don't want to be trapped inside of a building with 100 degrees, but outside with a breeze and the shade is nice. And then, of course, when we came home, the apparent temperature in Chicago was actually higher than when we left. It went from 90 with low humidity to 90 and 70% humidity here in Chicagoland. Absolutely oppressive. I kind of like the dry heat, but boy, 9 and 10% humidity is kind of rough. You got to make sure you put on a lot of lotion, and for me, a lot of chapstick. So one of the other things that struck me constantly is the scale of this stuff. Just driving around, and I took lots and lots of pictures, and I put a lot of them on Facebook. You could check them out there, but I don't know that the pictures, to me, I don't feel like the pictures do it justice. The scale of the things that you're looking at, it's hard to judge with a photograph, but being there or being near walls or cliffs that go up 150 feet, being near the base of, a mountain, an upswell of land where the cliffs at the top are 150 feet, but then there's this gradual hill. I think, we saw some that were 800, 900, 1,000 feet tall, just kind of just up. It's, I don't know, you feel small. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's good to keep you in perspective a little bit. The one other really fun thing that I do on vacations or anywhere I go, I often will ask people, how is your Italian? And, you're checking into a random hotel. How is your Italian? And they look at you funny and they're like, not so good. I don't speak any Italian. Or they'll say paparazzi or something like that. It's just something fun to do. But in tourist traps or really well-known large cities with tourism or, national parks, there are people often from all over the world that come to the United States to see these things. And we were at Bryce Canyon. Yes, Bryce Canyon at Bryce Lookout Point with a tour we were on that took us to like 5 or 6 different places in 3 hours. And I thought I heard Italian. I thought I heard someone speaking Italian. So I looked around to see who was speaking, and I'm in the middle of a crowd of people. And after I turn around, I hear Italian behind me again. And so I turn back around and I hear more Italian, but I can't figure out who's saying it. And I'm so confused. And part of me was thinking, is this heat stroke? Is this what happens when you get too hot or you don't have enough water? And so I just went up to some people and asked them if they were in Italian, if they were Italians. And they said yes, and, looked at me with shock. And so I started talking to them, and we had a nice conversation, and more people joined in. And at one point, there was probably 30 people around me, and it turns out that this was a very big scheduled tour thing that they Italians from all over Italy had signed up for this package vacation. For 8 days, they would see things like L.A., the Grand Canyon, Hoover Dam, and one of their stops was Bryce Canyon, which is where I ran into them. And so they were asking me questions, and I was responding back in Italian. Absolute highlight for me, because anytime I get to practice, it's kind of cool. But at one moment, of course, they always get to the point of, why? Why do you speak Italian? And, they'll say, do you have Italian family? And I'll tell them no. And they said, do you have work in Italy? And I say no. And every time, perché? Perché is why? Perché parla italiano? Why do you speak Italian? And I have a canned answer that I gave them is parlo italiano perché è la lingua più bella tutto il mondo. Basically, Italian is the most beautiful language in the world. That's why I learned it, because it's the most beautiful. And of course, Italians, I think almost anyone in any language would like that. And it was at this moment that I don't know if they felt kind of out of sorts because no one talks to them and they go to all these places and they're just kind of together but yet isolated. And sometimes Americans can be weird with people with accents. And now here is somebody that loves their language, and we're talking about the food. And then I throw out this thing about speaking the language because it's the most beautiful world in the world. And they broke out in fucking applause. And technically a standing ovation because we were all standing. But a little bit of a shock. But I enjoyed it more than I should have, I guess. It was an absolute surprise and delight. And at some point, the tour guide and people in the group were telling me, we have to go. And I didn't hear them. I didn't hear them at all. I was talking. And one of the Italians said, your friends want you to leave. It's time to go. And I turn around and I'm like, we got to go. Our tour group is now leaving. And I'm like, oh, can I just join these guys and get on their bus? I don't care where it goes. I'll just go with them. But of course, no, I can't do that. I had to get back with my tour group. And we continued on with our journey and had fun. But so that was my little fun side Italian story on vacation. But yeah, if you get a chance, go out there. Don't go in June. Don't go in July or August. Maybe even not September if you can avoid it. Freaking hot. And when we were out in the heat, walking a little bit, we were drinking, I think it's about a quart an hour. Yeah, because in about 4+ hours, I drank a gallon of a combination of water and Gatorade. So it is really critically important. We met a couple that was going to go walk in the Grand Canyon, and they figured, a water bottle or two would cover it. And so I had to explain to them. I asked them, I said, have you guys ever walked in a desert before? And they're like, it's the Grand Canyon. It's not a desert. Yeah, it's a fucking desert. And down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is hotter than shit. And you can start at 82 degrees in the rim and get over 100 down by the river. So we were talking to them about how much water to take and check with the rangers and see what they recommend, all that stuff. But anyway, had great fun with that. So I just kind of wanted to chat and share that a little bit. But we'll take another quick little break and get on with the rest of the show. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. Welcome back, everybody. This, of course, is Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. I have with me now, as promised, Tom Jump. How are you today, sir?
Doing pretty good. A little tired. Just woke up.
Oh, well, hopefully it's not too early. Did you get coffee? Are you a coffee drinker?
I used to be, but I've cut all carbs because I'm trying to lose 60 pounds over the next 3 months or so.
Ah, well, I see. Well, coffee doesn't have to have carbs, you know.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. Because without carbs, it tastes terrible.
You know, it's funny. I have become well versed in espresso, and I bought myself a very nice espresso machine a couple of years ago because I can't stand coffee. So with the espresso, you have the possibility of getting it to be palatable. It's quick, it's easy, and I get all the caffeine, and you can just shoot it and you're done. So
I have a coffee maker. I make 5 cups at a time and then put it into a giant mug.
Oh my.
Usually add like 1 cup of whole milk and then like 1.5 ounces of sugar, and that's about the perfect mix for me.
Yeah, it's the sugar, that's where the carbs are. Well, that and the dairy. But anyway, they want to get off on that too much, but you have a YouTube channel. I'm guessing it's named after you. It's T-Jump.
Yes.
And you were kind enough to have me on a couple days ago. And you know, I went and looked at the comments for that video, which is always dangerous to do. And everyone was so nice. You must have the nicest audience ever.
Well, if you're an atheist, yes. If you're a theist, not so much. Apparently, if you're on the side of the people who are commenting, then they're really nice to you. But if you're on an opposing side,
Yeah.
not quite as much.
Well, it not the way of the world, I guess. How did you start this YouTube channel? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was researching philosophy, and as a part of my researching philosophy, I would invite out professors to go to coffee, local professors at different colleges, and just to talk about different concepts in philosophy to test my knowledge. And I'd record it on my phone because it was convenient and upload it to my YouTube channel because I didn't want to take up the space on my hard drive. And people started to watch and send me money and send me a lot of money. And so I started to do it full time.
So this channel is your gig, and I was pretty sure that that was going to be the case because you are putting out a video a day, every day or two, one a day it looks like here.
Yes, and I actually hate doing that. So I actually have a guy who's volunteering to set up all my conversations for me, which is extremely useful, but he sets up a lot of them. And so he's been setting them up like every day, and I'm like, so much work.
It's so funny. I could almost use a service like that. The problem, of course, is I don't want to talk to the vast majority of people that you are talking to. if I can be so bold.
Me neither, by the way.
And it's delightful because you are, I don't know, frustratingly calm when talking to some of these people. And I guess I was the benefactor of that because when I was on the show, I probably did 90% of the talking, but that might be a problem with me, not necessarily you. But yeah, you've had on some people. What are your most interesting ones recently?
Well, it depends on how you define interesting.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I think the most intellectually interesting ones are the professors I have on.
Yeah.
Those are the ones where I get actual progress in the philosophical arguments, and they're pretty intellectually rigorous. I had on Rob Coons. He's a very, very intelligent theist professor, Thomist, extremely well educated. Robin Collins, one of the leading experts in the fine-tuning argument. That one, extremely interesting conversation where I got him to admit that there was a problem with the fine-tuning argument. But then there's like interesting as in dumpster fire interesting. And those are like the Darth Dawkins, the Godless Girl, the Lights and Colors Prove Jesus, the Flat Earthers. Those are some interesting ones. So if any of those sound interesting, check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/tjump. Send me money.
Yeah, of course, listeners, even if you don't think that's interesting, go check out his videos because there's other content. You had a candidate for the U.S. House. Let's see, talking about geocentrist universe, philosophy kindergarten. What is that?
Oh, that's my Sunday show. So I get invited to join a Discord.
Oh, okay.
Where there's like six speakers.
5 hours.
And we have a bunch of just random people on Discord who don't know anything about philosophy. And we argue with them.
Oh, that is fantastic. I'm going to enjoy that. I'll have to check that out later. So, Tom, now that we know a little bit about the channel, tell us about you. You were indicating what you did for work, but where did you grow up generally? I don't need a street address or anything. Were you raised religious? Were you secular? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was born in Dallas, Texas. It's hot there.
Yeah, I've heard.
And moved to Minnesota when I was about somewhere between 4 and 8 years old, so pretty young. And yeah, my parents are very religious. So I went to a Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, mass multiple times a week. Very painful.
Yeah.
And I started to lose my faith sometime around high school. So I was definitely very religious, and I had major depression for pretty much my entire life. And I had to pray to this God for help. And I prayed morning and night and didn't get any help. So after years and years of praying, I eventually just lost the ability to believe in it. Kind of like praying to a milk carton. You pray to a milk carton for help and it doesn't do anything.
Yes.
Eventually you start to realize it's just a milk carton. So sometime around high school is the end of high school is when I just stopped believing in God. I didn't identify as an atheist at this point yet because I didn't know what that term was. And about that time, a few years later, is when I started to research into philosophy and started to learn about philosophical positions like atheism and heard about the Four Horsemen, Hitchens, Aristotle's, Dennett. And that's when I really started to adopt the atheist label a few years after high school.
Very, very nice. And if you don't mind me asking, you're doing this full time, right? That's what you said. But what were you doing before?
My last job, I was a video game tester for Activision.
A video game tester? That sounds kind of nice.
Yes, most people normally say that. People who haven't been one. That is typically. So, have you played video games? Are you familiar with the basic structure of video games?
I have played video games, yes.
So imagine taking every character and having to bump up against every side of every wall, every inch of every wall on every map, and all day long for like 8 hours a day. And when you get this wonderful little like 30-minute break when you like clip through the wall and you find a bug, you then get to write like a 3-page report on how you found that bug, and you get to send it in. And then when they fix it, they send it back, like a revised version of the game. And you have to start all over. And you get this little checkbox, like a little grid of all the characters' names and all of the maps' names. And you have to go through every single wall and every single one of those all day long. Not the best.
And I guess that wouldn't be intellectually stimulating?
Yes. About as intellectually stimulating as talking to Godless Girl.
I'm not familiar with this person, and based on what you've said already, I'm not going to watch the video. I've skimmed through or listened to samples from about 10 different ones just this morning. Interesting people. It's I mean, of course, part of the show is finding people that are provocative and therefore entertaining. But what some of these people at least claim to believe is pretty astounding. Let's see. I have a soft spot for the insanity that is flat Earth. Walk me through that. How'd that happen?
Yeah, so flat Earth is actually insanely popular in the YouTube community. There's multiple secular atheists who have like massive YouTube channels just dedicated to debunking flat earthers because it's so hugely entertaining to listen to them talk about how gravity is fake and the moon landing is fake. And it's all just relative density. So it's just, I don't know how they think that works, but relative density pushes things down, apparently, and not any other direction. So yeah, getting into the flat earth debates was really entertaining because I met with Fight the Flat Earth. He's a big one that has a channel dedicated to that. Reg Rhetoric, another one, friends of mine who debunk flat earthers. And they have the most interesting way of looking at the world. Everything is a conspiracy by the government.
Yeah.
And if you agree, you are paid by the government. And so apparently I am a government shill who's paid by the government millions of dollars under the table.
Fair enough. You know, you got to work somewhere.
Yeah. I wish I knew about this earlier. My bank account would be significantly bigger.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. It is amazing. I was kind of hoping, maybe I'm looking at the people that you've interviewed, and maybe the average age is high enough, but some of them look pretty young. It was one of those things that, like with my kids, they grew up in an era of, spam and viruses. I'm talking about computer viruses and phishing emails. And I was kind of hoping that as a society, as a culture, when we get used to the fact that knowing everything is a scam, that you would become more alert to scams. And religion, I think, trains people to not have skills to be able to evaluate information, because otherwise you wouldn't be in the church. But I don't know. I just think even though there's all these emails and constant spam and everyone's trying to get your information, people are still gullible and believe things. What do you think on that idea?
I think it's partially true. I don't think religion is what trained people to do this. I think it's innate in human nature, and we have to train it out of ourselves. And if we don't, we're just innately geared towards thinking that there are these intelligences everywhere. So it's the anthropocentric fallacy of hyperactive agency detection system. So you hear a rustle in the bushes. If you think it's a lion, you run away and survive. And if you think, I'm going to be a good scientific investigator and wait for more evidence, and because it could just be the wind, that group of people did not survive as often. And so human beings evolved this trait to think there's always some kind of a demon or a lion or some intelligence behind everything. And so we just have this innate built thing in us. In the case of the fishing and the Nairobi princes who have millions of dollars.
Right.
Most of the people who fall for that are actually the elderly who haven't grown up with the internet. So most of the younger generation don't fall for that as much. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, the scams that you mentioned, yes, you're right. And before my mom passed away, we had to switch her over to a VoIP, voice over internet protocol phone, because having a landline pretty much tells scammers that you have a landline, you're an older person, because no one under 50, well, maybe some, but not many, have a landline. So inherently, they filter out young people to make these calls. But some of the things that younger Americans, I guess, have issues with are things like Ayn Rand. There's one that gets to me. A lot of people read Ayn Rand and they lock onto that and say that this is going to save the earth. And I get emails and phone calls where people go, so Phil, what do you think about fiat currency? And I know that that's going to be a problem. And we talked about it a little on your show. And I don't know how much you were baiting me just to keep the conversation going. But I hear people saying things that, like gambling on cryptocurrency or gambling at a casino is kind of like buying stocks. What do you think? Were you egging me on?
Partially. So there's definitely clearly a difference in a stable economy. Investing in a stable economy is more likely to make you money than like investing in a highly volatile thing. And so there's definitely a statistical difference between the two. But there is, because there are a lot of like penny stocks and things. Penny stocks are pretty much the same, I'd say, as gambling. I don't think most of them succeed. So I think there are definitely avenues within stocks that are pretty much exactly synonymous with gambling. And it's only if you know which stocks are the safe ones, like you mentioned, the index funds, those are the only ones that are like really viable options to really not qualify as gambling. If you're just investing in a random company you found on some kind of website, it's probably gambling. It's probably the same thing as gambling.
Yeah, I will agree with you that there are many companies that are essentially gambling because the investor has no knowledge about the company, what it does, how it makes money, how much money it makes. They've not gone through any of the financial records or documents. And even before we had Reddit, which is a place for a lot of this to happen, 20, 30 plus years ago, it was always a friend of mine said this was a good stock to buy, so I put $5,000 in it. And of course, I would want to ask, what does this friend know? Nothing. They just thought it was a good idea for me to put $5,000 in it. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah,
I've had a few family members who invested a lot, especially into oil right before the big crash, and lost six figures into that. So the reason I think a lot of stocks is fair to compare with gambling is because the amount of effort and knowledge it takes to be acquainted into field enough to not have it be gambling is a lot more than what most people are going to spend the time doing. And so kind of like buying a lottery ticket and not knowing your odds of losing or whatever, or going to a casino and not knowing your odds of losing, the vast majority of average everyday people buying stocks probably just aren't qualified enough to know what they're supposed to be doing, which is why rich people can make a lot of money off of the poor people, because they're not really educated in knowing what they're doing.
Well, I will definitely agree that not knowing what you're doing and just jumping in and buying things is bad. I remember back in the late 90s, I had a friend who was using CDs were his investment portfolio. He's making a couple % per year. And it was in the late 90s, and he got tired of watching all of his friends make huge returns on things like pets.com and all this, the new era and the new world and the technology bubble. And so he took all of his money out one day, found a broker, and bought 8 different high-tech stocks, and then lost half of his money in the next 12 months. He obviously didn't know what he was doing. And in that case, I could see how it would feel a lot like that. You do have a lot of religious people on, talk about religion. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure you're an atheist.
I'm a Pastafarian. I believe in the spaghetti monster. I'll praise the spaghetti monster.
Fair enough.
Mealy appendage.
Are you meat or meatless?
Oh, definitely meat. Like it has to be
Okay,
at least
okay.
50% meat or it doesn't count.
Because the meatless pastafarians fucking heretics, as far as I'm concerned. It's just unbelievable how people could believe crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, like vegans, like crazy vegans.
Although the one group I have, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, is when I criticize Bitcoin, that I get the most pushback of any topic I could ever cover is Bitcoin/cryptocurrency, which I'm looking through the last few weeks here, maybe even a few months. I don't know if you've had anyone come on to promote Bitcoin. How has that happened?
I've had a few on for NFTs. I got like paid
yes.
sponsorships for NFTs and some for, I think, Bitcoin or whatever. I don't like typically go into finances, but you should do one on Elon Musk, because I think if you criticize Elon Musk, you'll get more hate than Bitcoin.
I agree. I agree. I get probably the 1 and 2 topics are cryptocurrency, and then number 2 is Elon. I have talked in unflattering ways about Elon. So, yeah, I hear you. I think that's the number 2 issue of complaints. And maybe it's because a lot of my listeners, if they are offended about me and my listeners' discussions about religion, they just leave. But who knows? What are you going to do? What do you got coming up soon? Anything really tantalizing we should tune in for?
Yeah, I have a bunch of politicians coming on. I've been trying to work on a second channel where the goal is to have actual politicians debate each other. Today, in 2 hours, I have Mark White, independent candidate for Senate for North something or another, one of the North states. Then I have another one in a few more days. Forget who, though. I have 6 or 7 different U.S. politicians coming on in the next few weeks. Those are going to be interesting.
Yeah. Are there planned topics for them, or are they just coming on and gonna see who survives on their own?
Mostly it's just one-on-one, promote their platform, talk about different policies, and then if they agree to it, we can set up a debate with the other local politicians. We haven't been able to get like 2 politicians from the same district to debate each other yet. Like I had Shahid Buttar on, and he's pretty large overall. He's going up against Nancy Pelosi. Getting a debate between those 2 would be very interesting.
Now, you don't have Nancy Pelosi on, though. I mean, he's someone running against her.
Yeah, I'd like to have Nancy Pelosi on. That would be very fun.
That would be very fun, very interesting. What other subjects really should a listener look for or a viewer look for through your videos that you think would be very interesting?
Yeah, my primary topic is the existence of God, so I invite on theists, mostly experts in the field, to discuss the philosophical arguments for and against the existence of God. Usually have them taking the "this is evidence of God" position, and I take the "it's definitely not" position. And so I'd like to invite on the world-leading experts in the particular arguments, the people who William Lane Craig cites as his sources of evidence, like Josh Rasmussen, Rob Coons, Robin Collins. They're the people who William Lane Craig uses as a basis of giving evidence, and so I invite them on to try and show that those arguments aren't very good.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, you mentioned high school, you kind of fell out with the idea of a deity. It only to the level of what you are comfortable sharing. How are things with family? Did you lose friends? Did you lose family? How'd that all work out for you?
I was never close to anybody for most of my life. So I was, because of my depression and other neurodivergencies, I was diagnosed with high functioning autism. So I never got along with other people. So I didn't have any friends or any close family then until I was in like my late 20s, early 30s. So I didn't really have anything to lose at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. And now, do you have a community? Do you go to any kind of local group? What works for you?
Yeah, I go to lots of groups. I go to meetup groups and secular organizations, Campus Atheist Skeptics and Humanists at the University of Minnesota. Mostly it's just me forcing myself to be social. They're not really things that I feel like a part of. Because again, because of my autism, it's harder for me to find emotional connection with people.
Yeah.
It's always been that way. So I've been had to learn how to fake it, mostly fake being interested in emotional connection to try and build communities. But I haven't really found a place that I really feel like I belong.
Yeah, and church is not that place, I take it.
Well, actually, church has most of the things I'd really like, but with extra dogma I would not like. So churches are actually really, really good, in my opinion, in contrary to your opinion.
Clearly.
I think that churches provide a very interesting opportunity for people who have a diverse skill set to come together and to work together on things that anyone in the group may be very bad at. So like someone who's very socially introverted can go into a church and find friends in youth groups who are very socially extroverted and can introduce them to people and can build connections and find relationships, both friendships and romantic relationships, and get introduced to people that they never would have met otherwise. And so churches offer a lot of social connection and community and help with the skill sets that you don't have by providing a community of a diverse group. And that's something I would very much like to have. So I'd like to have that aspect of church, but in a more secular area.
Yeah. Now, have you ever gone to a UU church?
Yes.
Okay.
The humanitarians and the Unitarians churches, there's several of them in the area. I've also been to the humanist and Minnesota atheist groups.
Very nice. One of the other things that we did talk about briefly on your show, and I've heard it in a couple other segments, the idea of, I don't know, an atheist church, a non-God church that would have the good stuff and not necessarily the bad stuff. And one of your focuses, and correct me if I'm wrong, was to somehow use tax loopholes of a religion to try to provide people a reasonably affordable place to live. Does that sound right? Walk me through that.
Yeah, so essentially, churches are offered a lot of different tax incentives and legal benefits that other organizations aren't. And these benefits can be used to help millions of people. Like one of the ways is like a local nonprofit called the NOAA Impact Fund, the Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Fund, buys up apartment buildings and then sells rent, but at a significantly lower affordable rate. And if we had a church organization who was tax exempt, obviously, to buy up these kinds of apartment buildings and then get $500,000 off because they don't have to pay for like taxes, state and local and federal taxes, then we can give that back by giving the tenants lower rent. And so if we imagine all churches in America did this, that would be a hugely moral beneficial thing for millions of people. But obviously Christian churches don't do this. They're more interested in money and church buildings. But if we could start an atheist church that is actually devoted to really helping people in the way that churches have the opportunity to but don't, we can show what a religion can be, show what a church can be, what it should be. And I'd really like to adopt that very strange criticism where Christians say, well, atheism is religion too. I'd kind of like to take the route where we say, yes, it is, and it's better than yours because we do more moral things. We help more people. We do more things for more people, and we don't ask them to believe or burn in hell.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Tom, how can people reach you? And maybe you're not the most social person, but if a conference wanted to have you as a speaker, would you be up for that?
Definitely. I do that a lot, actually. I have one coming up in November, so that is definitely a part of my occupation where I do it. I'm happy to do it. You can check on my YouTube channel. My work email is tejump@comcast.net, and it's plastered all over my YouTube page where to find that.
Yeah, it wasn't hard to find stuff. Everybody, once again, it's T, as in Tom, Jump, T-Jump, nice short YouTube channel name, and under every video, at least everyone that I looked at, there's a dozen ways to contact you, donate money, because you are now making, I think you said this, you're making a living doing this. And trying to provide information and education to people. So if someone else has a few bucks to spare, you can go do that. Is there anything about you, your channel, what you're doing that we haven't talked about that you would like to cover?
I think we've covered most of the things. Like the three big things I'm working on right now is political debates channel, the atheist church channel, and just growing my channel in general. Those are the three things.
Well, Tom, thank you very much for your time being on the show. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to come on, and it's always fun to talk with you. So happy to be on.
Fourth, for condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church. You're born in sin. There's a revolting piece of casuistry that's sometimes offered on this point. Yeah, we hate the sin only. We love the sinner. Stephen is, I'm sorry to say, not quite like other girls. It's his nature. Actually, he is like other girls in that he's, when I last checked, absolutely boy mad. He's not being condemned for what he does, he's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh, no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join our church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church. For shame, for shame.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
I did think of one more investing thing I did want to cover currently, and this is not part of the Polaris plan in total, but just something that comes to my mind I wanted to readdress. Previously, I have talked about avoiding certain types of bonds. I've also discussed the fact that even though I'm in mostly conservative bonds, very low yield bonds, they got whacked pretty hard. Harder than I expected, honestly. Some of them down 3, 4, 5, maybe even more % in the last several months, 2022 year to date. It's been pretty bad. But compared to some of the longer term bond funds, it's been abso-freaking-lutely amazeballs. As an example, the Vanguard Long-Term Treasury Index, Admiral shares, the symbol on that, in case you want to go look it up yourself, is VLGSX. Year to date, and we're mid-late June of 2022, so almost 6 months. In almost 6 months, this fund has gone down 22.65%, 23%. Last year, it was down 5%. So 23 plus down 28%. Absolutely devastating if you had no idea that that was a possibility. And this is one of those things I can point to. Yay me. But people often ask, and gosh, I should do a segment on that, is an advisor worth the money that you pay the advisor? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. I'm leaning on the side that yes, it is if they know what they're doing. If it's someone just selling you shit, well, no, you could do better on your own. Listen to the show, listen to the plan, make your own plan, follow the plan, save a lot of money, wait. I know, really boring investment advice. It's save your own money and wait a long time. That's the gist of it. But avoid costs, avoid expenses, try to avoid taxes where you can, be reasonable. But it can be very, very helpful to know how some shit works beyond just a basic level, which is why I have the 4-book reading list, which I talk about all the time, so I'm going to skip it here. But this is one of those areas where I have been avoiding for quite some time because there's this really fascinating correlation between the value of a bond and the interest that it pays. And when bond interest rates go up, the actual value of the bonds go down. So if you already own those bonds, you can lose money. If it's a very short-term bond, the amount of money you lose is generally small. If it's a long-term bond, the amount of money you can lose can be quite large. And so this portfolio of bonds that I mentioned from Vanguard has a average maturity of 20 years. It has a duration of around 20 years. And it is now paying about 1.5% more than it did a year ago. Because a year ago, you could buy this fund and the dividend was, I don't know, 1.5, 1.8, 2 maybe. And now it's in the low threes, 3.5. So it went up 1.5%, the yield did. And if the average maturity or duration is 20, then you should expect it to go down about 30% because you're locked into getting this lower interest rate, where the other person, a new person, can come in and buy that fund or that bond on the market going forward, let's say making 3.5%, well, you're holding a bond that pays 2%. Now, if you hold the bond to maturity, if you own the individual bond, you would get your money back and you would get the 2% every year. But a lot of people would prefer to have the 3.5%. So your bond becomes less valuable. That's the gist of it. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to, after June 30th, I'm going to have to do a review of how all that is working year to date. But this was an area that got whacked pretty hard. What's it going to do going forward? I don't know. I think interest rates are going to still go up. I think long-term rates are still going to go up some. And so long-term bonds could lose over the next year or two 10, 15, 20% more, maybe. But also very fascinating. I went to a webinar put on by Vanguard, 2 advisors, and I go to a lot of, I click on a lot of webinars because sometimes I learn things. And this one Vanguard presentation had something I'd never seen before. And I've thought about it, but I never calculated it out rigorously like they did. They had a fascinating thing where they showed that the decreased value of the bonds occurs because of the increased dividend of the bonds and the bonds in the portfolio and the index fund for the bonds or managed bond fund. So while you might have lost 30%, you are now gaining 1.5 to 2% more per year. So the question is, when does that even out? And for the total bond index fund from Vanguard, they calculated that to be about 7 years from now, or 7 years from the drop. A longer term bond fund, it might take a little longer. Shorter term bond funds, which I am heavily weighted in and my clients are heavily weighted in, and this is the current recommendation of the plan, that effect is much shorter time period because short term bonds have gone from something like 0.5% to 1.5 to 2%. And so you're going to make 1.5% more per year if you lost 4.5% in that first year, but then you get 1.5% more each following year. You see where I'm going here? In 3 years, you'll still be even. So your risk to the downside is smaller. The amount of time necessary to recoup that loss is smaller. But of course, you're making 2%, not 3.5%. So in the longer term bonds, you can now make more. So they become a little bit more attractive. I'm not ready to change anything in the mix in that part yet, but it is a fascinating thing. Now, of course, if you're getting closer to retirement, those bonds, you didn't have the 5% drop. You probably had a bigger drop currently in stocks, but it's something that if the market recovers smartly, and it may or may not, but if it does, and you're 10 years or less from retirement, maybe even 13, 14 years or less from retirement, it would be a good opportunity to think about reallocating a little bit more money to bonds. Not right now. Not right now because the stocks are down more than that. But it's funny, this is one of the biggest areas of pushback I've gotten over the last 2 to 3 years is when I tell someone who's 10 years from retirement, let's take 3, 4, 5% of the stock money that you have and move it from stocks and sell at a big gain and put it in bonds, which is really lame and boring. And people don't want to take money off the table when they're winning. That is the exact time you need to do so. It's so counterintuitive and so difficult to do. But that's the way you need to think about it. And now that stocks are down dramatically, 20%, give or take, depending on what you're looking at, is it time to add to stocks? Maybe. Maybe it's right for you. If you're sitting on a big pile of cash that you've been waiting for a dip, just seems pretty dippy. But if you're only a few years from retirement, maybe not a good idea. Maybe you just keep the bonds. But for anyone who's a client, we can have those conversations at great length. If you're a listener and you want some thought maybe on your portfolio, you can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and possibly we can go over that. Just a general comment, of course, I always welcome show topic ideas. I do get quite a few of them, and quite a few of them I do actually turn into content for the show, but not always. And if you sent me something awesome and I didn't get to it, my apologies. But I am always looking for new show topic ideas. I guess that's more than I wanted to say anyway. So I'm going to wrap up, and I hope to see you out there in the world at a conference sometime soon. Until then, ciao.